Single moms are easy. A creep follows a single mom home. But when he thinks she's an easy target, her Marine training turns the night upside down. Yet what no one sees coming is how this fight will unleash a town's darkest whispers and force her to ask, will standing tall cost her everything, or finally set her free? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The neon sign of Ruby's Diner cast a pinkish glow across the nearly empty parking lot, its familiar hum mixing with the chirp of crickets in the warm evening air. Inside, Lena Matthews moved methodically between tables, her experienced hands working the cleaning cloth in efficient circles across the worn Formica surfaces. The diner's night shift was winding down, with only a handful of regulars still occupying their usual booth near the window. Their friendly chatter provided a comfortable backdrop to her closing routine, until she felt it, that unmistakable sensation of being watched. She didn't need to look up to know where it was coming from. The man had been sitting at the counter for the past hour, nursing a coffee that had long gone cold. He wasn't a local. Lena knew most faces in their small town, and this one was new. Something about his presence made her skin crawl. "More coffee?" she'd asked earlier, keeping her tone professional despite his lingering stare. "Only if you're serving something extra sweet with it, darling," he drawled, letting his eyes roam over her uniform in a way that made her want to shower. But Lena had dealt with his type before, both in the Marines and here at the diner. She'd simply given him a flat look and moved on. Now, as the clock ticked closer to closing time, Lena could still feel his eyes following her every move. Her Marine training had taught her to stay alert without showing tension, to maintain awareness while appearing casual. She kept her movements smooth and controlled as she worked, her body relaxed but ready. "Night, Lena," called Martha from the regulars' booth. "Tell those kids of yours we missed them at Sunday school this week." Lena managed a warm smile, grateful for the familiar faces. "Will do, Martha. Tommy had a cold, but they'll be there next Sunday for sure." The bell above the door chimed as the regulars filed out, leaving only the stranger and the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights. Lena's hands never stopped moving as she continued her closing duties, but her senses remained sharp, tracking the man's presence like radar. He finally stood, dropping a few crumpled bills on the counter. The legs of his stool scraped against the floor, the sound unnaturally loud in the empty diner. "Shame to leave such pretty company," he said, his voice carrying an edge that made Lena's muscles tense. "Maybe I should wait around. Make sure you get to your car safe and sound." "That won't be necessary," Lena replied evenly, not looking up from the table she was wiping. "I managed just fine on my own." She heard him chuckle, an ugly sound that seemed to stick to the walls. The bell chimed again as he pushed through the door, but Lena knew better than to relax. Through the large windows, she could see him lingering in the parking lot, lighting a cigarette with deliberate slowness. Lena finished her closing routine with practiced efficiency, her exterior calm masking the growing knot in her stomach. She thought of her children at home with the sitter, waiting for her return. The image strengthened her resolve. She'd faced worse than this during her tours. She wouldn't let some creep with boundary issues shake her. She did one final check of the kitchen, making sure all the appliances were off and the back door was secure. The familiar tasks helped center her, just like the pre-mission checks she used to do. When everything was in order, she gathered her purse and jacket, then stood for a moment in the darkness of the kitchen, taking slow, measured breaths. The front door's lock clicked solidly as she secured it, the sound echoing in the empty parking lot. The stranger's cigarette glowed like a malevolent firefly in the shadows near the dumpster. Lena's keys were already in her hand, gripped between her knuckles in a way she'd taught her daughter just last month. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her footsteps were steady. As she walked toward her car, her awareness extended to every shadow, every sound. The weight of the man's presence pressed against her back, but she didn't give him the satisfaction of looking around. She'd learned long ago that sometimes the best defense was to show no fear, even when your heart was pounding against your ribs. Each step took her closer to her vehicle, the distance seeming to stretch like taffy in the artificial glow of the parking lot lights. Her keys pressed reassuringly against her palm, cool metal warming to her skin as she maintained her grip. The night air carried the scent of the stranger's cigarette, a harsh intrusion in the otherwise clean evening breeze. Her car waited just 20 feet away now, its familiar outline a promise of safety. But Lena knew better than to let her guard down. She kept her pace steady, her breathing controlled, ready for whatever might come next. Years of training and instinct thrummed through her body, preparing her for what she sensed was coming. The cigarette's glow traced an arc through the darkness as the man flicked it away. His footsteps, which he wasn't trying to hide anymore, scuffed against the asphalt behind her. Lena's jaw tightened, but she maintained her measured stride. Her car was close now, its metal surface reflecting the diner's neon sign like a mirror of pink and white light. The parking lot lights cast long shadows across the cracked asphalt as Lena stepped out of Ruby's diner. Her keys jangled softly in her hand, the familiar weight of her car fob pressing against her palm. The sound of her sensible work shoes echoed in the empty lot, each step measured and purposeful. A sudden movement caught her attention. The man from the diner emerged from behind a pickup truck, his face twisted into what he probably thought was a charming smirk. The fluorescent lighting from above cast harsh shadows across his features, making him look more sinister than he likely intended. "Hey there, pretty lady," he called out, his voice carrying across the empty space. "A single mom working late shifts? You're making this too easy." Lena's jaw tightened, but she kept walking, her Marine training kicking in as she assessed her surroundings. 3 cars in the lot, no other witnesses. The nearest streetlight flickering unreliably. Her own vehicle was still 20 feet away. "I'm talking to you," the man said, his tone shifting from mock playful to something harder. He moved with surprising speed, cutting across her path to block her way to her car. "Don't be rude now." His hand shot out, grabbing her arm with enough force to leave bruises. It was the wrong move. Lena had spent years training for moments exactly like this, and her body responded without hesitation. In one fluid motion, she twisted her captured arm, using his own momentum against him. Her fingers found his wrist, applying pressure to the precise point that would cause maximum discomfort with minimal effort. The man's eyes widened in shock as she executed a perfect wrist lock, forcing him to bend forward to relieve the sudden pain. "What the—" he started, but Lena wasn't finished. With the control and precision that had been drilled into her during her Marine Corps training, she brought her knee up sharply, not to cause permanent damage, but to ensure he understood she wasn't the easy target he'd imagined. The impact drove the air from his lungs, and he doubled over, gasping. "Stay down," Lena commanded, her voice steady despite her racing heart. She maintained the wrist lock, keeping him in a controlled position. "Don't make this worse for yourself." The man struggled briefly, but each movement only increased the pressure on his locked wrist. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he realized he was thoroughly outmatched. As if answering an unspoken prayer, the distinctive whoop of a police siren cut through the night air. Red and blue lights began to paint the parking lot in alternating colors as a patrol car turned into the lot, its headlights sweeping across the scene. 2 officers emerged quickly, their hands on their weapons until they assessed the situation. "Everything all right here?" the taller officer called out, approaching cautiously. "This man attacked me in the parking lot," Lena explained calmly, still maintaining her hold. "I'm a former Marine. I subdued him and was waiting for assistance." The officers moved in efficiently, taking control of the situation. As they secured the man in handcuffs, Lena finally released her grip, stepping back to give her statement. She watched as they patted him down and read him his rights, his earlier bravado replaced by sullen silence. "You'll need to come down to the station to file a formal complaint," one of the officers told her, flipping open his notepad. "But first, are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" Lena shook her head, rubbing her arm where he had grabbed her. "No, I'm fine. He didn't have time to do any real damage." The parking lot became a brief flurry of activity. Statements taken, forms filled out, evidence photographed. Through it all, Lena maintained her composure, answering questions with military precision while the man was secured in the back of the patrol car. Finally, after what seemed like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, the officers gave her clearance to leave. "We'll need you to come by the station tomorrow to complete the paperwork," the younger officer said, handing her his card. "You did good work here, ma'am." Not everyone would have kept their cool like that. Lena nodded, watching as they pulled away, the flash of their lights growing smaller until they turned the corner and disappeared. Only then did she allow herself to exhale fully, her shoulders dropping slightly as the adrenaline began to ebb. The walk to her car felt longer than usual. Her hands were steady as she unlocked the door, but she could feel the delayed tremor of reaction setting in. Inside the safety of her vehicle, Lena took a moment to breathe deeply, her fingers gripping the steering wheel as she centered herself. The engine started with a familiar rumble, and she backed out of the parking space, leaving Ruby's diner and its neon sign behind. The streets were empty at this hour, and the drive home was mercifully uneventful. As she pulled into her driveway, the house stood dark and quiet, her children safely asleep inside. Sunlight filtered through the pale blue curtains of the Matthews kitchen, casting warm patterns across the worn wooden table. Lena stood at the counter, pouring coffee into her favorite Marine Corps mug, the aroma filling the small space. Behind her, the quiet scraping of cereal spoons against bowls couldn't mask the tension hanging in the air. Michael sat with his shoulders hunched, pushing his cornflakes around more than eating them. His dark hair fell across his forehead as he stared into his bowl. Emma, perched on her chair with perfect posture, hadn't touched her breakfast at all. Her eyes, so much like her late father's, followed her mother's every move. "Mom," Emma finally broke the silence, her voice small but steady. "Mrs. Peterson called this morning. She said there were police at the diner last night." Lena's hand paused mid-pour. Of course Sarah Peterson had called. Their neighbor meant well, but she treated local gossip like breaking news. Lena set the coffee pot down and turned to face her children, leaning back against the counter. "Yes, there was an incident after closing," she said carefully, choosing her words. "Everything's fine now. It's been handled." Michael's spoon clattered against his bowl. What kind of incident? His jaw clenched, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that it made Lena's heart ache. "A customer was being inappropriate," Lena explained, keeping her voice level. "When he followed me to my car, I had to defend myself. The police came and arrested him." "He followed you?" Michael pushed his bowl away, his face flushing with anger. "Did he hurt you? I swear if he—" "Michael," Lena cut him off firmly but gently. "I'm okay. My training kicked in, and I handled it exactly like I was taught to in the Marines." Emma wrapped her arms around herself, her breakfast forgotten. "But what if he comes back? Is it safe for you to work there?" Lena crossed the kitchen and placed a reassuring hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Ruby's has been good to us for 3 years. One bad apple doesn't change that. Besides," she managed a small smile, "I think he learned his lesson about underestimating single moms." "This isn't funny, Mom." Michael stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You shouldn't have to deal with creeps like that. Maybe I should start picking you up after late shifts." "Absolutely not," Lena straightened, meeting his worried gaze with firm resolve. "You have school and practice. Your job is to focus on that, not to worry about me. I've been taking care of myself, and both of you, just fine." "But Dad would have—" Michael started, then stopped himself, but the words hung heavy in the air. Lena took a deep breath, pushing down the familiar ache those unfinished sentences always brought. "Your father would want us to be strong, but smart, and that's exactly what we're being." Emma reached for her mother's hand. "Did you use that wrist lock thing you showed me once?" "Something like that." Lena squeezed her daughter's fingers, grateful for her attempt to lighten the mood. "Now finish your breakfast, both of you. We're running late." The drive to school was quieter than usual. Michael stared out the passenger window, his backpack clutched tight against his chest. In the back seat, Emma tapped away at her phone, probably texting her friends about what happened. Lena couldn't blame her. News traveled fast in their small town. As they pulled into the high school parking lot, Lena noticed a group of parents by the entrance. Their conversation stopped as her car approached, heads turning to watch. Mrs. Baker, who usually waved cheerfully, quickly looked away. "Great," Michael muttered, spotting the attention they were drawing. "Here we go. Head high," Lena reminded him, using the phrase that had become their family motto after losing their father. "We have nothing to be ashamed of." Michael's hand lingered on the door handle. "You sure you're okay, Mom?" "I'm sure," she smiled, though her heart ached at the worry in his young face. "Now go on. You'll be late for first period." He nodded, stepping out of the car. Through the window, Lena watched him square his shoulders as he walked past the staring parents, looking so grown up and yet still so young. At the middle school drop-off, Emma leaned forward between the seats. "Maybe we could have dinner at home tonight instead of you working." "Nice try, sweetie." Lena reached back to touch her daughter's cheek. "But Thursday nights are our busiest." "I'll be fine. Promise you'll be careful?" "Always am." Lena watched as Emma climbed out, her backpack covered in the positive message pins she loved collecting. "Have a good day, baby." As Emma walked toward her friends, who immediately huddled around her in a protective circle. Lena noticed more parents watching. A couple whispered behind their hands, their eyes darting between her and their phones. The story was spreading, probably growing more dramatic with each retelling. Lena gripped her steering wheel tighter, remembering her Marine drill instructor's words about maintaining composure under pressure. She'd faced down worse than neighborhood gossip. Still, as she pulled away from the school, she couldn't shake the feeling that last night's parking lot confrontation was just the beginning of a different kind of battle, one that couldn't be won with a simple wrist lock. The afternoon sun beat down on Lena's windshield as she pulled into Ruby's Diner's parking lot. Her shoulders tensed at the sight of unfamiliar cars lined up outside. The lunch rush was in full swing. Taking a deep breath, she smoothed her navy uniform and walked toward the entrance. The bell chimed as she pushed open the glass door. Jenny, her closest friend at work and fellow waitress, stood behind the counter rolling silverware into paper napkins. The moment their eyes met, Jenny's usual warm smile faltered. "Lena, honey, can we talk for a minute?" Jenny glanced around before motioning toward the break room. The knot in Lena's stomach tightened as she followed Jenny through the swinging kitchen doors. The small break room smelled of microwave popcorn and coffee, its fluorescent lights humming overhead. "What's going on?" Lena asked. Though part of her already knew, Jenny wrung her hands. "People are talking, Honorable, about last night." She lowered her voice. "Some folks are saying you went overboard with that guy. That maybe you overreacted." The words hit Lena like a physical blow. "Overreacted? He followed me into a dark parking lot. He grabbed me." I know. Jenny touched her arm. "But you know how this town island, they're saying a simple no would have been enough, that you didn't need to get physical." Lena's military training kicked in, helping her maintain composure despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. A simple no doesn't work when someone's trying to assault you in an empty parking lot. The lunch shift dragged on endlessly. Lena felt the stares, caught the whispers behind raised menus. Regular customers who usually chatted warmly now avoided eye contact. When she approached table 6, Mrs. Henderson, who'd been coming to Ruby's for 15 years, clutched her purse closer. By mid-afternoon, the diner had quieted. Lena was wiping down the counter when the bell chimed. Sarah from the salon across the street rushed in, her face flushed. "Lena, you need to hear this." Sarah glanced over her shoulder before continuing. "Randall Brooks is over at his dealership telling everyone you're unstable. Says his brother Tommy's arm is in a sling, that you attacked him without provocation." The cleaning rag in Lena's hand stilled. "Tommy Brooks, the car dealer's brother?" Sarah nodded. "Randall's saying you've got PTSD from your military days, that you're dangerous to have around customers." The fluorescent lights suddenly seemed too bright, the diner too small. Lena had dealt with Randall Brooks before. His influence in their small town ran deep. His car dealership sponsored Little League teams, funded church renovations, and employed half a dozen local families. "That's ridiculous," Lena managed, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "There were security cameras. The police have the footage." "Honey, you know how it works here. People believe what they want to believe." The rest of her shift passed in a blur. By the time Lena pulled into her driveway that evening, her neck ached from holding her head high all day. The porch light was on, and through the window, she could see Michael pacing in the living room. The screen door slammed behind him as he stormed out to meet her. "Is it true? Are people saying you're crazy?" "Michael, Jason's dad was at the dealership today. He heard everything." Michael's face was red with anger. "How can they talk about you like that? You're a hero. You served our country." Lena reached for him, but he jerked away. "This isn't about my service, honey. Some people just, if Dad were here, no one would dare talk like this." The words exploded from him, raw and jagged. "He wouldn't let them spread lies about you. He'd protect us." The accusation hung in the air between them. Michael's eyes widened as he realized what he'd said, but the damage was done. He turned and ran into the house, leaving Lena rooted to the spot. She waited until she heard his bedroom door slam before following him inside. Emma was at a friend's house for dinner, and the empty house echoed with Michael's words. In the kitchen, Lena's gaze fell on the triangular shadow box mounted on the wall. Inside, the American flag was precisely folded, each crease sharp and meaningful. She'd received it at James's funeral 3 years ago, along with his medals and the thanks of a grateful nation. Moving as if in a trance, Lena lifted the shadow box from its mount. The weight of it, the weight of everything it represented, settled in her arms as she carried it to the kitchen table. The overhead light cast a harsh glare on the glass as she sat down. Her fingers traced the edges of the frame, remembering James's smile, his laugh, the way he'd always known exactly what to say when she doubted herself. The silence of the house pressed in around her, broken only by the distant sound of Michael's music thumping through his closed door. Tears slid down her cheeks, dropping onto the glass. She'd faced firefights and combat, endured the loss of her husband, raised 2 teenagers alone. But somehow, the whispers and stares of people she'd known for years cut deeper than she'd expected. In the reflection of the glass, she saw what the town was choosing to see. Not a widow doing her best, not a veteran who'd served with honor, but a threat, someone to fear and avoid. The flag stayed silent, perfectly folded, unable to offer the comfort she desperately needed. In its precise angles and crisp fabric, she saw everything she'd lost and everything she was still fighting to protect. Her heart broke not just for herself, but for her children who had to witness their mother being painted as a villain for defending herself, for her late husband who would have been devastated to see his family treated this way, and for a community that could so quickly turn against one of its own. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows of First Baptist Church, casting colorful shadows across the worn wooden pews. Lena Matthews stood in her bedroom, staring at the simple navy dress hanging on her closet door. Her fingers traced the edge of her Marine Corps insignia pin, a small reminder of her strength that she always wore to church. "Mom, we're going to be late," Emma called from downstairs. The sound of her daughter's footsteps echoed through the house. Lena's hand dropped from the pin. "Maybe we should skip today," she said as Emma appeared in the doorway. "I'm not feeling well." Emma's face fell. She wore her favorite yellow sundress, her brown hair neatly braided. "But Mom, it's important. Plus, I helped set up for the coffee hour after service." Michael's voice carried from his room. "I'm staying home. This is stupid." "Michael Matthews," Lena called out, her voice firm. "We're going as a family." 20 minutes later, Lena pulled into the church parking lot, her hands tight on the steering wheel. The usual crowd milled around the entrance, dressed in their Sunday best. As they stepped out of the car, conversations hushed. Heads turned. "Just hold your head high," Lena whispered, more to herself than her children. Emma slipped her hand into her mother's, while Michael trudged behind them, hands stuffed in his pockets. Inside, the whispers followed them like shadows. Mrs. Henderson, who usually saved them seats, suddenly became very interested in her hymnal. The Johnson family, whose son played baseball with Michael, shifted uncomfortably in their pew. "Did you hear what she did? Such violence! And she has children." The words drifted around them like poison. Emma's hand tightened in Lena's as they found seats near the back. Michael slumped down, his face burning red. The organ music started, but Lena barely heard it. Her mind wandered to the folded flag at home, to Tom's smile, to the life they'd planned together. The congregation stood for the first hymn, and Lena's voice caught in her throat. Then she felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. Pastor Jordan stood beside their pew, his kind eyes meeting hers. At 70, he still stood straight as an arrow, his silver hair neatly combed, his presence commanding respect. Without a word, he sat down next to her family. The gesture wasn't lost on the congregation. Heads turned, whispers intensified. But Pastor Jordan simply opened his hymnal and began to sing in his deep, steady voice. After the third verse, he leaned closer to Lena. "When I came back from Vietnam," he whispered, "people looked at me the same way. They didn't understand. They feared what they didn't know." Lena's eyes burned with unexpected tears. She nodded, unable to speak. When the time came for prayers, Pastor Jordan stood at the pulpit, his voice filling the sanctuary. "Today," he began, "we pray for understanding. We pray for those who protect others, whether in uniform or out of it. We pray for single mothers who carry heavy burdens with grace and courage." His eyes found Lena's. "Lord, we ask you to bless those who stand against darkness, who defend the vulnerable, who teach their children strength through example. Help us remember that true character isn't shown in moments of ease, but in moments of challenge." Emma squeezed her mother's hand. Even Michael sat up straighter. "Amen," the congregation murmured. After the service, Pastor Jordan waited as people filed out. When Lena approached, he took both her hands in his. "Walk with me a moment?" They moved away from the crowd, toward the church garden where early spring flowers were beginning to bloom. "You know," he said, studying a budding rosebush, "when I first came home, people crossed the street when they saw me coming. They'd heard stories about veterans, about PTSD, about violence." He touched a green leaf gently. "They didn't see that everything I'd learned about combat was to protect others, not harm them." Lena felt her shoulders relax for the first time in days. "How did you handle it?" "One day at a time, with faith, with dignity." He turned to face her. "And by remembering that other people's fear doesn't define who we are." "My children shouldn't have to deal with this," Lena said softly. "No, they shouldn't. But they're learning invaluable lessons about courage and truth. They're watching their mother stand tall in the face of injustice." He smiled. "That's worth more than 1,000 easy Sundays." Emma appeared around the corner. "Mom, Michael's waiting at the car." Pastor Jordan patted Lena's shoulder. "My door is always open. And Lena, you did the right thing. Don't let anyone tell you different." Walking toward the parking lot, Lena felt lighter. Emma chatted about her Sunday school class, and even Michael had lost his scowl. For a moment, it felt like a normal Sunday. Then, she saw him. Randall stood by his expensive black SUV, his arms crossed, watching them. His presence was like a dark cloud over her moment of peace. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared with cold calculation in his eyes. The fragile hope Pastor Jordan had kindled flickered but didn't die. Lena squared her shoulders, remembering his words about dignity. She guided her children to their car, feeling Randall's eyes on her back but refusing to give him the satisfaction of her fear. The hallway of Cedar Grove High School echoed with the sharp bang of Michael Matthews' locker door. His jaw clenched as he caught snippets of whispered conversations around him. Two sophomore girls quickly looked away when he turned, but their words had already reached his ears. "His mom's the crazy one who attacked that guy." Michael's hands trembled as he gripped his backpack straps. The familiar rage bubbled up inside him, the same anger that had been his constant companion since his father's death 3 years ago. Now it had a new target, the gossip that seemed to follow him everywhere. "Hey, Matthews," called out Jason, his former friend from the basketball team. "Better watch out. Your mom might put us in a headlock if we pass too close." A few nearby students snickered. Michael's face burned. He squared his shoulders and walked past them, refusing to give them the satisfaction of a response. But each step felt heavier than the last. Across campus in the middle school wing, Emma Matthews sat perfectly still in her chair, pretending to read while the PTA meeting carried on behind her. She'd come early to help set up the bake sale table, but now she wished she'd stayed in the library instead. "I heard she's trained in killing techniques," Mrs. Peterson Stage whispered to another mother. "What kind of example is that for our children?" "My husband says she's violent," Mrs. Warner added. "Randall Thompson told him the whole story. That poor man barely touched her, and she nearly broke his arm." Emma's fingers tightened around her book until her knuckles turned white. She wanted to turn around and tell them about her mom, about how she made heart-shaped pancakes on birthdays, or how she still checked under Emma's bed for monsters, even though Emma was 13 now. Instead, she sat there, tears pricking at her eyes, as the mothers continued their cruel conversation. The morning sun had barely reached its peak when Lena pushed through the heavy glass doors of Ruby's diner. The familiar bell chimed overhead, but today it felt more like a warning than a welcome. She'd barely tied her apron when Dave, the manager, beckoned her into his cramped office. "Look, Lena," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "You're one of our best servers. The regulars love you. But this situation..." He shuffled some papers on his desk. "Maybe you could keep a lower profile for a while? Take the morning shifts instead of nights?" Lena's military training kicked in automatically, spine straight, face neutral, emotions carefully contained. "Are you cutting my hours, Dave?" No, he backpedaled quickly. "Just suggesting some changes. For everyone's comfort." Everyone's comfort. The words felt like a punch to the gut. She nodded stiffly and left his office, the weight of judgment pressing down on her shoulders like a physical thing. The day dragged on, each hour marked by sideways glances and conversations that stopped when she approached tables. By the time she got home, exhaustion had settled deep in her bones. Emma was already setting the table for dinner, the familiar routine of plates and forks providing a small comfort. But Michael stormed in, throwing his backpack onto the floor with enough force to make the windows rattle. "Michael," Lena started, her voice stern but tired. "Don't," he snapped. "Just don't, Mom. You have no idea what it's like." Emma froze with a glass in her hand, her eyes darting between her brother and mother. "Everyone at school." Michael's voice cracked. "They're all talking about you. About us. I'm sick of being the weird Marine mom's kid." "Why couldn't you just be normal? Why did you have to make such a big deal about that guy?" The words hung in the air like shrapnel. Lena gripped the back of a chair, her knuckles white. "Should I have let him hurt me instead?" she asked quietly. "That's not what I meant," Michael shouted. "But now everything's messed up. Coach barely played me today. My friends won't talk to me. And it's all because you had to be. You." Emma set down the glass with a sharp clink. "Stop it, Michael. Mom didn't do anything wrong." "Easy for you to say," he shot back. "Your friend's parents aren't calling our mom a violent psycho." Lena felt something inside her crack. Without a word, she turned and walked out onto the front porch, letting the screen door slam behind her. The evening air was cool against her face, but she barely noticed. She sank onto the old wooden steps, finally allowing the tears she'd been holding back all day to fall. The porch light cast a weak yellow glow around her, while crickets chirped in the darkness beyond. She could hear muffled voices inside. Emma and Michael still arguing. Her children shouldn't have to defend her. They shouldn't have to carry this weight. Lena wrapped her arms around herself, feeling more alone than she had since Tom's funeral. Back then, at least. The town had rallied around them. Now those same people looked at her like she was dangerous, treated her children like they were tainted by association. A car drove past slowly, and Lena recognized Randall Thompson's expensive SUV. He didn't stop, but she could feel his satisfaction radiating through the tinted windows. In just a few days, his whisper campaign had turned her whole world upside down. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, tasting salt on her lips. The tears weren't just for herself. They were for Michael's anger, for Emma's lost innocence, for the community she thought she knew. Through the window, she could see her children's silhouettes moving in the kitchen, the dinner she'd planned now forgotten. The night stretched out before her, dark and uncertain. Lena stared into it, her throat tight with unshed tears, knowing that tomorrow would bring more whispers, more judgment, more battles to fight. The woman who had faced down threats in combat now felt powerless against the invisible weapons of rumor and prejudice. The morning sun crept through the kitchen window, casting warm squares of light across the worn linoleum floor. The gentle gurgle of the coffee maker filled the quiet house as Emma Matthews carefully measured out the dark-roasted grounds. 2 scoops, just the way her mom liked it. Her movements were deliberate, trying not to wake anyone else this early. Lena entered the kitchen, her Marine Corps t-shirt wrinkled from another restless night. She paused, surprised to find her 13-year-old daughter already dressed for school and working in the kitchen. "Morning, Mom," Emma said softly, pouring the steaming coffee into Lena's favorite mug, the one with "World's Best Mom" painted in her childish handwriting from years ago. "I made your coffee." "You're up early, sweetheart." Lena's voice was rough with fatigue. Emma handed her the mug, her eyes serious beyond her years. "You're brave, Mom. They just don't see it yet." The simple words hit Lena like a physical force. She set the coffee down, her hands shaking slightly. "I was thinking," Emma continued, pulling out a chair and sitting at their small kitchen table. "What if we started a group at school? For kids like me and Michael, with single parents?" Lena settled into the chair across from her daughter, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "What kind of group? Like a support circle?" "There are more of us than people think," Emma's eyes lit up as she explained. "We could meet during lunch, maybe. Talk about stuff. Show everyone that single-parent families aren't weird or broken. They're just different kinds of strong." Lena studied her daughter's earnest face, marveling at the wisdom there. "When did you get so grown up?" "I learned from the best." Emma smiled, then turned serious again. "Mom, people are scared of what they don't understand. But if we help them understand..." A knock at the front door interrupted them. Through the window, they could see Pastor Jordan on the porch, his silver hair catching the morning light. Lena opened the door, self-consciously smoothing her shirt. "Pastor Jordan, this is unexpected." "Good morning, Lena." His kind eyes took in her tired appearance. "I hope I'm not intruding. I was on my morning walk, and felt led to stop by. She stepped back, gesturing him inside. Emma waved from the kitchen, already pulling out another coffee mug. "I wanted to check on you," Pastor Jordan said, accepting the offered seat at the table. "Yesterday's service, well, I noticed some attitudes that troubled me deeply." Lena's shoulders tensed. "Pastor, He held up a weathered hand. "Let me finish. Those whispers, they remind me of when I came back from Vietnam. People looked at us veterans like we were dangerous, unstable. They didn't understand what we'd been through, or why we did what we had to do." Emma set a mug of coffee in front of him, then quietly sat down to listen. "But you know what I learned?" Pastor Jordan continued, his voice gentle but firm. "Our strength isn't measured by what others say about us. It's measured by how we rise above it." "That's kind of like what I was telling Mom," Emma chimed in. "I want to start a group at school for kids with single parents." Pastor Jordan's face brightened. "Now that's the kind of initiative we need. Building bridges instead of walls." He turned to Lena. "Your daughter has the right idea. Sometimes the best response to darkness is to shine brighter." Lena felt something shift inside her chest. A small spark of warmth pushing back against the cold weight of the past few days. She watched as Emma enthusiastically explained her ideas to Pastor Jordan, who nodded encouragingly and offered suggestions. "You know," Pastor Jordan said thoughtfully, "the church basement is empty most afternoons. If your group needs a meeting space outside of school hours..." Emma's eyes widened. "Really? That would be amazing." The conversation continued, plans taking shape in the morning light. Pastor Jordan shared stories from his own experiences with community healing, while Emma scribbled notes about her group idea in a notebook she'd retrieved from her backpack. When Pastor Jordan finally stood to leave, he placed a steady hand on Lena's shoulder. "Remember, Lena, you're not alone in this fight, and it is a fight worth fighting." After he left, Lena went upstairs to get ready for work. She stood in front of her bathroom mirror, studying her reflection. The same face looked back at her, tired eyes, worry lines at the corners of her mouth. But something was different. That spark of resolve Emma had ignited, strengthened by Pastor Jordan's words, flickered in her chest. She squared her shoulders, lifted her chin. The woman in the mirror was a Marine, a mother, a survivor. She'd faced worse than small-town gossip and come through stronger. "You faced worse," she whispered to her reflection. "Stand tall." Behind her, Emma appeared in the doorway, already wearing her backpack. "Ready for school, Mom?" Lena turned to her daughter, drawing her into a tight hug. "Thank you, sweetheart, for everything this morning." Emma hugged back fiercely. "That's what family does, Mom. We hold each other up." Michael's bedroom door creaked open down the hall, and they could hear him shuffling toward the bathroom. Another day was beginning, bringing its own challenges. But for the first time since the incident in the parking lot, Lena felt something besides fear and isolation. She had her children. She had allies like Pastor Jordan. And most importantly, she had that spark of resolve, small but growing stronger with each passing moment. Lena squared her shoulders again, remembering her Marine training. Sometimes the bravest thing wasn't charging into battle. It was standing your ground day after day until the world learned to see the truth. The evening rush at Ruby's Diner had settled into its usual rhythm. The clinking of plates and murmur of conversations filled the air as Lena moved between tables, coffee pot in hand. The fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow over the chrome fixtures and worn leather booths. The bell above the door chimed. Lena looked up to see Randall striding in, his expensive suit out of place among the casual diners. His face was flushed with anger, and he made straight for her, pointing an accusing finger. "There she is, the woman who attacked my brother." His voice boomed across the diner. The usual chatter died instantly. Forks stopped mid-bite. All eyes turned to watch. Lena's hands trembled slightly as she set down the coffee pot, but her voice remained steady. "Your brother followed me to my car and grabbed me. I defended myself." "Defended yourself?" Randall scoffed. "You assaulted him. He needed medical attention." He moved closer, towering over her. A decent woman would have called for help, not acted like some violent vigilante. The word violent hung in the air. Lena felt the weight of every stare. Old Mr. Peterson hunched lower over his meatloaf. The young couple by the window whispered to each other. Sarah, her fellow waitress, stood frozen by the kitchen door. "I did call for help," Lena said, meeting Randall's glare. I called the police. They have the report. Your brother was arrested for assault. He was confused, disoriented. Randall's face grew redder. And you took advantage, didn't you? Saw a chance to play hero? No. Lena squared her shoulders, speaking clearly so everyone could hear. I'm a mother who was being threatened. I'm a Marine who was trained to protect myself. And I'm a woman who refused to be a victim. Oh, we all know about your Marine background now, don't we? Randall sneered. Is that your excuse for everything? For terrorizing innocent men? The diner remained deathly quiet. A few customers stared at their plates. Others watched with uncomfortable fascination. The wall clock ticked loudly. Your brother wasn't innocent, Lena said firmly. He followed me. He grabbed me. He threatened me. Those are facts, Mr. Randall, and no amount of your influence can change them. Randall's jaw clenched. He looked around the diner, seemingly surprised that his words weren't having the effect he'd hoped for. A few people were beginning to nod slightly at Lena's words. This isn't over, he spat. You'll regret making an enemy of my family. He turned sharply and stormed out, the door slamming behind him. The silence lingered for a moment. Then old Mrs. Wilson, who'd been coming to the diner for 20 years, spoke up. You okay, dear? Lena nodded, picking up her coffee pot with slightly shaking hands. I'm fine, Mrs. Wilson. Can I get you a refill? As she made her rounds, the usual diner noise gradually returned. A few customers touched her arm as she passed, offering quiet words of support. Don't let him bully you, whispered Mr. Chen, as she refilled his cup. My daughter's in the Marines too, said a man she didn't recognize. You did the right thing. By closing time, Lena's nerves had settled. She collected her purse and keys, said goodnight to the cook, and walked to her car. The parking lot was quiet now. But this time, the silence felt different, less threatening. As she drove home through the familiar streets, a small smile tugged at her lips. Maybe, just maybe, the tide was beginning to turn. The library study room felt too big for just 3 people. Emma sat cross-legged on one of the worn cushioned chairs, watching as her friends Sarah and Jenny settled into their seats. A hand-drawn poster hung crooked on the wall behind them. Strong Mom's Circle, all welcome, decorated with hearts and stars and bright markers. Thanks for coming, Emma said, her voice quieter than she'd planned. The empty chairs around them made her stomach twist, but she pushed ahead anyway. I know it's weird being the first ones. Sarah tucked her long dark hair behind her ear. I think it's cool you're doing this. My mom works 2 jobs since the divorce. Sometimes I hear kids say stuff like we're different or something. That's exactly why I wanted to start this, Emma said, sitting up straighter. Everyone acts like having just a mom makes us weird, but our moms are amazing. Jenny nodded, playing with the zipper of her backpack. My mom learned how to fix our car herself because we couldn't afford the mechanic. She watched YouTube videos for like 3 days straight. Emma's face lit up. See, that's what I mean. My mom was in the Marines, and now she works so hard at the diner. She even protected herself when that creepy guy. She stopped, remembering how her mom hadn't wanted to make a big deal about it. Outside in the hallway, Michael paused on his way to basketball practice. He'd come to return Emma's science textbook she'd forgotten at home, but his sister's voice made him hesitate by the door. My mom cried last night, Emma continued, unaware of her brother listening. She thinks we don't know, but I heard her. And she still got up at 5 this morning to make us breakfast before work. That's stronger than any superhero. Michael's hand tightened on the textbook. He remembered snapping at their mom during dinner last week, how her face had stayed calm even while her eyes showed hurt. Sometimes I see her looking at Dad's flag, Emma said softly. But she never lets us see her sad for long. She's always asking about our day, checking our homework, making sure we're okay. Sarah leaned forward. My mom's like that too. Last month when I was sick, she worked all day, then stayed up all night with me. I don't know how she does it. That's why we need this group, Emma declared, to remind everyone that our moms are heroes. Maybe if more people join, they'll stop believing those mean rumors about your mom, Emma. Michael shifted his weight, the floorboards creaking beneath him. He quickly stepped away from the door before anyone noticed him. Walking toward the gym, he thought about how his mom still came to every one of his games, even after double shifts. How she'd learned to throw a basketball just to practice with him when Dad died. Meanwhile, at the diner, Lena was refilling sugar dispensers when she noticed something tucked under the coffee maker. It was a small card, slightly bent at the corners. Inside, in careful handwriting, "Lena, my mother raised 3 of us alone. She taught me that real strength isn't about what people say about you, but what you do despite it. Thank you for showing that same strength, Nancy." Lena traced the words with her finger, warmth spreading through her chest. Nancy was the quiet morning shift cook who barely spoke, except about orders. The simple message felt like a lifeline thrown across troubled waters. That evening, after the kids were in bed, Lena knelt beside her own bed. The house creaked softly around her, and through the window, crickets sang their night songs. She hadn't prayed properly in weeks, not since the incident in the parking lot stirred up all this trouble. "Lord," she whispered, her hands clasped tight, "thank you for the small mercies today." She thought of Nancy's card, tucked safely in her uniform pocket. "Thank you for showing me I'm not alone, even when it feels that way." Her whispered prayers filled the quiet room, gratitude mixing with hope as she thanked God for her children's strength, for unexpected kindness, and for the courage to face another day. The wooden floor was hard against her knees, but Lena stayed there, letting herself feel the full weight of thankfulness for these tiny sparks of light in the darkness. Each one felt like a promise that maybe, just maybe, things could change. The cream-colored walls of Millbrook Town Hall seemed to close in around Lena as she stood in the crowded entrance, her hand gripping Emma's tightly. Red and gold streamers decorated the ceiling, and circular tables dotted with flickering battery-operated candles filled the space. The annual charity fundraiser was always the biggest event of the year, drawing nearly everyone in their small town. "We can still go home," Lena whispered to Emma, eyeing the packed room. Her navy blue dress felt too tight, too formal, like armor she wasn't sure would protect her. Emma squeezed her hand. "No way, Mom. Your chocolate chip cookies are going to raise so much money at the bake sale table." Her daughter's smile was bright and determined, reminding Lena of herself at that age. They made their way through the crowd, dodging polite nods and a few whispers. Lena kept her chin up, even when she spotted Randall holding court near the punch bowl, his expensive suit, a stark contrast to the casual attire of those around him. "Mrs. Matthews." Pastor Jordan's warm voice cut through the buzz of conversation. He stood near the stage, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "I'm so glad you came." Michael appeared from somewhere in the crowd, hands stuffed in his dress, pants, pockets. He'd fought against coming, but had finally given in when Emma mentioned the basketball team was helping serve desserts. "The place looks amazing," Lena said, glancing at the Millbrook Cares banner hanging above the stage. Various local charities had set up booths around the perimeter of the hall, each collecting donations for their causes. The evening progressed with the usual speeches and presentations. Lena sat at their table, picking at her chicken dinner while Emma chatted enthusiastically with the elderly couple next to them. Michael disappeared periodically to help with serving, though Lena noticed he kept looking over at their table. Pastor Jordan took the stage after the main course, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Tonight is about community," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. "It's about standing together, supporting each other through hard times and good." He paused, scanning the room. "Sometimes the greatest acts of courage happen right here in our town, unnoticed or misunderstood." Lena's stomach tightened. She knew that look in his eyes. "We have someone here tonight whose story needs to be heard," Pastor Jordan continued. "Lena Matthews, would you please join me?" The room fell silent. Emma grabbed her hand under the table, whispering, "Go, Mom! Show them who you really are!" Lena's legs felt like lead as she stood. The walk to the stage seemed endless, each step echoing in her ears. She could feel every eye in the room following her movement, could sense Randall's angry presence somewhere in the crowd. Pastor Jordan helped her up the steps, then stepped back, leaving her alone at the microphone. The spotlight felt hot on her face, and for a moment, she was back in boot camp, facing her first major challenge. Taking a deep breath, Lena gripped the microphone stand. "I'm not used to speaking in public," she began, her voice shaky but gaining strength. "Most of you know me as the widow who works at Ruby's Diner, or the single mom with 2 teenagers. She paused, finding Emma's encouraging face in the crowd. "But before that, I was Marine Sergeant Matthews." A murmur rippled through the audience. Lena continued, "I served 8 years, including 2 tours overseas. My husband, James, was also a Marine. We believed in protecting others, in standing up for what's right. Her voice caught slightly at James's name, but she pressed on. When he died 5 years ago, I thought my fighting days were over. The room was completely silent now, every person leaning forward slightly in their chairs. Even the servers had stopped moving, standing still with their dessert trays. 2 weeks ago, a man followed me to my car after my shift at the diner. He thought I was an easy target. Just a waitress, just a single mom. Lena's voice grew stronger. But being a mother doesn't make me weak. Being a widow doesn't make me vulnerable. My Marine training taught me to protect myself, and that's exactly what I did. She saw Michael standing at the back of the room, his usual defensive posture softening as he listened. I've heard the whispers, Lena acknowledged. That I'm dangerous, unstable, violent. But I ask you, what would you want your own daughters to do if they were cornered in a dark parking lot? What would you want your sisters, your wives, your mothers to do? Heads nodded throughout the crowd. Even some of the women who had been the loudest gossips looked down at their plates. I love this town. It's where my children are growing up, where James is buried, where I'm trying to build a life that would make him proud. Lena's voice filled with emotion. All I did that night was protect myself, the same way I'd protect any of you if you were in danger, because that's what Marines do, and that's what mothers do. The silence held for a moment after she finished. Then, from somewhere in the middle of the room, a single person began to clap. The applause spread like a wave, growing louder and louder until it filled the entire hall. People began to stand, first Emma, then Pastor Jordan, then table after table until the whole room was on their feet. Lena blinked back tears as she looked out over the crowd. She saw Mrs. Peterson, who had pulled her children away at the grocery store last week, now clapping with tears in her eyes. She saw her diner manager nodding with respect. Even a few people from Randall's table were standing, though he remained seated, his face dark with anger. As she stepped down from the stage on shaking legs, Pastor Jordan caught her elbow, steadying her. "Well done, soldier," he whispered. Emma ran to her, throwing her arms around her waist. "That was amazing, Mom. Did you see everyone standing?" But it was Michael who surprised her most. He pushed through the crowd and wrapped her in a fierce hug, something he hadn't done since before James died. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he whispered against her hair, his voice thick with emotion. The Matthews family drove home in comfortable silence, the warmth of the evening's success still glowing within them. Streetlights cast gentle shadows through the car windows as they wound through familiar neighborhoods. Emma hummed softly in the back seat, while Michael, for the first time in weeks, wore a genuine smile. Lena's hands were relaxed on the steering wheel, her shoulders free from their usual tension. The applause from the town hall still echoed in her ears, and the memory of Michael's proud embrace made her heart feel full. Even the usual worry lines around her eyes had softened. "Can we stop for ice cream?" Emma asked, leaning forward between the front seats. "It's pretty late, sweetheart," Lena replied, but her tone was gentle. "How about we make hot chocolate at home instead? With marshmallows?" Emma's voice lifted hopefully. "Extra marshmallows," Lena promised, turning onto their street. The peaceful moment shattered as their house came into view. Even in the darkness, something was wrong. Lena's trained eye caught the glint of broken glass scattered across their front lawn like cruel stars. Her Marine instincts kicked in instantly. "Stay in the car," she ordered, her voice sharp with authority. She pulled into their driveway, leaving the headlights on to illuminate the damage. "Mom, no," Michael started. "Stay in the car." Each word was firm, leaving no room for argument. Lena stepped out cautiously, her eyes scanning the area. The front windows were smashed, jagged shards still clinging to the frames. Ugly red letters screamed across their white siding, "Crazy Marine Witch," and worse words that made her stomach turn. Despite her command, car doors opened behind her. She heard Emma's gasp and Michael's sharp intake of breath. "I told you to stay in the car," Lena said, but the fight had drained from her voice. "Oh, Mom," Emma whispered, reaching for her hand. Across the street, curtains twitched. Neighboring porch lights clicked on, then off again quickly. Someone was watching, but no one came to help. Michael pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police." Lena nodded, moving toward the house with careful steps. Glass crunched beneath her dress shoes, the nice ones she'd worn specially for the charity event. The porch light revealed more damage, flower pots smashed, their welcome mat torn, and a crude drawing sprayed on their front door. Her hand shook as she unlocked the door, checking inside before letting the children enter. Nothing seemed disturbed inside, but the cool night air rushed through the broken windows, making the curtains dance like restless ghosts. Emma started crying quietly. "Why would someone do this?" Lena pulled her daughter close, stroking her hair. "Some people," she started, but couldn't find the words to explain hate to her child. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Red and blue lights soon painted their walls in alternating colors. A harsh reminder of that night in the diner parking lot. 2 police cars pulled up, and officers stepped out with flashlights. "Ma'am," one called, "please stay inside while we check the perimeter." Lena recognized him, Officer Martinez, who'd been at the diner that night. His face showed genuine concern as he documented the damage, taking photos and notes. "We know who did this," Michael said, his voice hard. "It was that creep or his brother. We'll investigate," Officer Martinez assured them, but his tone lacked conviction. "Do you have somewhere you can stay tonight? Those windows need to be secured." "We're staying right here," Lena said firmly. "This is our home." The officers finished their report while Lena called their insurance company. Emma and Michael worked together, picking up the larger pieces of glass from the living room floor. Neighbors continued their furtive watching, but none came to offer help or comfort. After the police left, Lena found a broom and dustpan in the kitchen. Her hands trembled as she swept, each scrape of glass against the hardwood floor like a bitter reminder of how quickly things could change. Just hours ago she'd felt accepted, validated. Now the night air bit through broken windows, and ugly words marked their walls. "We should board up the windows," Michael said, his voice low and angry. "I'll get the plywood from the garage." "It's late," Lena replied. "We'll do it in the morning." "And just leave them open all night?" He kicked at a pile of glass. "Great plan, Mom." "Michael," she warned, but her voice cracked. He looked at her, really looked at her, and his anger seemed to deflate. "I'll get some garbage bags and duct tape. At least that'll keep the cold out." Emma appeared with their vacuum cleaner. "I'll help clean up." Lena watched her children work, their fancy clothes from the charity event now covered in dust and dirt, the hot chocolate forgotten, the triumph of the evening shattered like their windows. She kept sweeping, trying to keep her movements steady, trying to be strong for them. Michael taped garbage bags over the window frames, the black plastic rustling in the night breeze. He worked methodically, his jaw clenched tight. When he finished, he stood back, looking at their makeshift repairs. "We're on our own," he muttered, and the words hung in the air like frost. Lena kept sweeping, the repetitive motion helping her maintain composure. But each stroke of the broom felt like an admission that maybe they were alone, that maybe the support they'd felt earlier was as fragile as glass, that maybe... She shook her head, focusing on the task at hand. Sweep, gather, dispose, one piece at a time, one moment at a time. It was all she could do for now. Sunlight crept through the jagged edges of broken blinds, casting strange shadows across the Matthews kitchen floor. The familiar morning routine felt oddly hollow as Lena stood at the stove, mechanically flipping pancakes. The sizzle of batter hitting the hot griddle seemed too loud in the uncomfortable silence. Emma sat at the kitchen table, pushing pieces of pancake around her plate with her fork. Her usual morning chatter was absent, replaced by darting glances at the plywood-covered windows. Michael slouched in his chair, his tall frame somehow looking smaller than usual, his food untouched. "The blueberry ones are your favorite," Lena said, trying to inject warmth into her voice as she slid another pancake onto Michael's plate. Her hand trembled slightly as she poured more batter, creating an uneven circle. "Not hungry," Michael mumbled, pushing his chair back with a scrape that made them all wince. Lena turned back to the stove, blinking hard against the burning in her eyes. The coffee maker gurgled in the background, its familiar sound now seeming out of place in their altered kitchen. Dishes from last night's hasty cleanup were still piled in the sink, a reminder of how quickly their evening of triumph had turned to terror. After the children left for school, Lena began making calls. Mrs. Henderson next door, who usually brought over extra tomatoes from her garden, didn't pick up. The Wilsons across the street, whose children had played with Emma since kindergarten, let their phone ring endlessly. Even Carol, who'd worked the morning shift at the diner with Lena for 3 years, sent her straight to voicemail. Each unanswered call felt like another crack in the foundation of her life here. Lena sat at the kitchen table, staring at the phone screen until it went dark. The morning sun highlighted dust motes dancing through the air, reminding her of the glass she'd swept up the night before. When she arrived at work for her afternoon shift, Jerry, her boss, called her into his cramped office. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as he shifted uncomfortably in his chair, not quite meeting her eyes. "Listen, Lena," he began, fiddling with a stack of order tickets. "Maybe you should take some time off, just until things settle down." "Jerry, I need this job," Lena said, her voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. "My kids—" "It's not permanent," he interrupted, still looking at the papers instead of her. "Just a few weeks, paid leave, until this whole situation blows over." The words "situation" and "blows over" echoed in her head as she drove home early, her uniform still fresh and unwrinkled in her bag. The afternoon sun felt too bright, too cheerful for the darkness settling over her life. At home, the silence pressed in around her. She wandered from room to room, straightening pictures that didn't need straightening, wiping counters that were already clean. Her husband's flag, carefully folded in its display case, caught her eye. The sight of it brought fresh tears. Evening crept in, painting the walls in shades of orange and purple. Lena had called the school earlier, asking Michael to take Emma to youth group at church. She needed time alone, time to face the weight crushing down on her spirit. In the gathering darkness, Lena finally sank to her knees beside the kitchen table. Her prayer began as a whisper, broken and hesitant. "Please," she breathed, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. "I don't know what to do anymore." The words came faster then, tumbling out between quiet sobs. She prayed for protection for her children, for strength to face tomorrow, for guidance in this storm. Her voice grew stronger as she poured out her fear, her anger, her desperation. "I can't do this alone," she whispered. "I thought I was strong enough, but I'm not. Please help me find a way through this." Hours passed, as Lena alternated between prayer and silent tears. She pulled her old Bible closer, its familiar leather cover worn soft with use. The pages fell open to Psalms, and her eyes traced over highlighted verses she'd marked in happier times. Exhaustion eventually overcame her, and Lena's head slowly lowered onto her crossed arms. The Bible remained open beside her, its pages catching the last light of day. Her breathing evened out as she drifted into uneasy sleep, tear tracks still visible on her cheeks. The kitchen grew dark around her still form. The only sound, the gentle tick of the clock on the wall and the distant hum of traffic. Through the broken blinds, stars began to appear in the night sky, silent witnesses to her vulnerable moment of surrender. The morning light hadn't yet broken when Emma gently shook her mother's shoulder. Lena's head rested awkwardly on the kitchen table, her Bible still open beside her, pages wrinkled from where she'd dozed off. Her neck ached from the uncomfortable position. "Mom," Emma whispered urgently, her face glowing with an excitement Lena hadn't seen in days. "You have to come outside. Right now." Lena blinked, trying to orient herself. Her daughter's hand tugged at her sleeve with gentle insistence. The kitchen clock read 6:15 a.m. Through the boarded-up windows, the sky was just beginning to lighten, turning from black to deep blue. "Emma, honey, what's going on?" Lena's voice was rough with sleep. She straightened, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles. "Just come," Emma insisted, practically bouncing on her toes. "Please?" Michael appeared in the doorway, his expression softer than it had been in days. "Mom, you really need to see this." Something in their faces made Lena push back from the table. She was still wearing yesterday's clothes, wrinkled from sleeping in them. She ran a hand through her disheveled hair, trying to smooth it down. Okay, she conceded, following her children through the living room. Glass still crunched under their feet despite their best efforts to clean up yesterday. The sound made her wince. Emma reached the front door first, throwing it open with flourish. Lena stepped onto the porch, and her hand flew to her mouth. On their front lawn stood at least 20 people. Women from Emma's Strong Moms circle held handmade signs. "We stand with Lena. Marine Mom equals Hero Mom. Love conquers hate." Sarah Jenkins from the grocery store was there with her teenage daughter. Mrs. Rodriguez from 2 streets over clutched a thermos of what smelled like fresh coffee. Even shy Mrs. Chen from the library stood proudly holding a sign. Pastor Jordan's pickup truck was parked at the curb, its bed loaded with lumber, tools, and supplies. The pastor himself wore work gloves and a tool belt, talking quietly with Mr. Wilson, their elderly neighbor who'd been too scared to answer Lena's calls yesterday. More cars were pulling up, the Henderson family from church, 3 of Lena's regular customers from the diner, parents from Michael's football team. Each arrival carried something: casseroles, cleaning supplies, or simply willing hands ready to work. The Strong Moms group chat was buzzing all night, Emma explained, slipping her hand into Lena's. Everyone was so angry about what happened. They wanted to do something. I don't understand, Lena whispered, her voice thick with emotion. After days of whispers and turned backs, the sight before her seemed almost unreal. Pastor Jordan approached the porch, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. The Lord works in mysterious ways, Lena. Sometimes it takes darkness for people to find their light. He gestured to the gathering crowd. These folks have been watching, thinking, praying. What happened last night, that was the last straw. Nobody in our community should face hatred alone. Sarah Jenkins stepped forward, her sign tucked under one arm. My Jenny came home yesterday telling me about Emma's Strong Moms Circle. Made me realize I've been too quiet, too afraid to stand up. Not anymore. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded firmly. Mi familia has been here 3 generations. We know what it's like when people judge without knowing your heart. No more hiding in shadows. Michael had been standing quietly beside Lena. Now he straightened, looking more like his father than ever. I'll get the extra work gloves from the garage, he said, his voice steady. We've got a lot of windows to fix. The morning sun was rising properly now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It caught the tears on Lena's cheeks as she looked at the gathering of neighbors. People who'd found their courage overnight, who'd chosen to stand with her family when it mattered most. Emma squeezed her hand. See, Mom? I told you they just needed time to see how brave you are. Lena drew a shaky breath, overwhelmed by the sudden shift from isolation to community. Yesterday's despair felt like a distant memory in the face of such tangible support. These weren't just neighbors anymore, they were allies, friends who'd stepped out of their comfort zones to declare where they stood. Pastor Jordan was organizing work crews, his voice carrying across the lawn. Teams of 4 for the windows. We'll need sanders for these porch railings. Anyone brought paint scrapers? The air filled with the sounds of tailgates dropping, tools being sorted, voices calling out offers of help. Mrs. Chen had set up a folding table near the driveway, arranging breakfast pastries and thermoses of coffee. Children darted between the adults, carrying supplies and giggling as they were given small tasks to help. Lena watched as Michael joined a group of football dads, confidently discussing the best way to measure for new window panes. Emma had gathered with other kids from her Strong Moms circle, their proud mothers watching as the girls organized a cleanup crew for the spray-painted walls. I never expected. Lena's voice trailed off, still processing the scene before her. That's community, Pastor Jordan said quietly, pausing beside her. Real community. Not the shallow kind that runs from conflict, but the deep kind that shows up when it counts. He patted her shoulder. Now, why don't you go change into some work clothes? We've got a lot of healing to do today, and it starts with these walls. The morning light strengthened, warming the gathering of people who'd chosen to stand against darkness. Someone had brought a radio, and gentle music mixed with the sounds of work beginning. Laughter floated across the lawn as neighbors who'd been strangers yesterday found common ground in shared purpose. Lena stood on her porch, surrounded by the evidence that she wasn't alone after all. Her whispered words were barely audible, but they carried the weight of profound gratitude. We're not alone after all. Come on! Emma's excitement was contagious as she pulled Lena toward the front door. Michael stood at the window, his usual scowl replaced by a look of bewilderment. Lena stepped onto her front porch, and her hand flew to her mouth. There, spread across her lawn in the early morning light, stood at least 20 people. Some held signs that read, "We stand with Lena," and "Strong Mom, Strong Community." Pastor Jordan was there with a toolbox and lumber. Emma's friends from the Strong Moms circle had brought their mothers, who clutched casserole dishes and cleaning supplies. Mrs. Matthews, Sarah Miller, the PTA president, who had been among the first to whisper about Lena, stepped forward. I was wrong. We're here to help." Tears welled in Lena's eyes as more cars pulled up. Her diner manager, Tom, arrived with paint cans. Even Mrs. Chen from the corner store brought her famous dumplings and her husband's carpentry skills. The morning air filled with the sounds of work and fellowship. Men climbed ladders to replace the broken windows, while women organized a makeshift kitchen on folding tables in the yard. The sharp tap-tap-tap of hammers mixed with gentle laughter and conversation. Michael stood awkwardly on the porch until Pastor Jordan called out, "Young man, could you help me with these measurements?" At first, Michael moved with reluctance, shoulders stiff. But as the morning wore on, Lena watched her son's posture change. He worked alongside the men, learning how to properly set a window frame, his face showing the first real smile she'd seen in weeks. Emma flitted between groups like a happy butterfly, serving lemonade and collecting stories. "Mom," she whispered during a quiet moment, "Jenny's mom said she was inspired by your bravery at the diner. She left her abusive husband last week." The smell of fresh paint mingled with the aroma of home-cooked meals. Mrs. Rodriguez's enchiladas sat next to Mrs. Smith's fried chicken. The spread on the folding tables grew as more neighbors arrived, each bringing something to share. "Lena," Sarah Miller approached again, wringing her hands. "I need to say something." She glanced at the ground, then met Lena's eyes. "When I heard about what happened at the diner, I let fear cloud my judgment. I thought about my own daughters and what people might say. But watching you stand tall, seeing how you've protected your children while keeping your dignity, well, you've taught us all something about real strength." More apologies followed throughout the day. Some were awkward, others tearful, but each one helped stitch the torn fabric of community back together. Lena accepted them with the grace she'd learned as a Marine and the forgiveness she'd learned as a mother. By mid-afternoon, the transformation was stunning. Fresh paint covered the hateful graffiti. New windows gleamed in the sunlight. The lawn, which had been trampled during the vandalism, sported new sod donated by the local garden center. Michael worked steadily, his initial reluctance forgotten. When he successfully installed a window lock, Pastor Jordan clapped him on the shoulder. "Your father would be proud," the pastor said quietly. "And your mother already island." Michael stood straighter, his chest puffing out just a little. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the renewed house, someone brought out folding chairs. People settled onto the porch and lawn, paper plates balanced on knees, sharing slices of pie. Mrs. Chen's apple pie sat next to Mrs. Johnson's pecan, and Mrs. Rodriguez's tres leches cake. Lena looked around at the gathered faces, now familiar and friendly in the dusk light. Her house hadn't just been repaired, it had become a symbol of something larger. The broken windows that had represented her isolation now reflected the warm glow of community. Emma sat on the porch steps, surrounded by her friends, their young faces animated as they talked about expanding the Strong Moms Circle. Michael leaned against the railing, actually laughing at something Pastor Jordan's son had said. And all around them, neighbors chatted and shared food, the evening air filled with the comfortable murmur of friendship. The afternoon sun beat down on the grocery store parking lot as Lena Matthews pushed her cart between the rows of cars. Her shopping list had been simple today, just the basics for dinner and school lunches. The past week had been surprisingly peaceful, with the community rallying around her family in ways she never expected. She hummed softly, thinking about Emma's proud face when more kids had joined the Strong Mom Circle. Even Michael seemed lighter lately, helping neighbors repair the house without complaint. The memory of shared pie on the porch still warmed her heart. The peaceful moment shattered as a familiar voice cut through the air. "Well, look who at Island." Lena's spine stiffened. She knew that voice, the same one that had threatened her at the diner. Her hands tightened on the shopping cart as she turned to face him. The creep stood there, hands in his pockets, that same awful smirk on his face. His bail release had been in the local paper, but she hadn't expected to run into him so soon. He looked exactly as she remembered, tall, with cold eyes that made her skin crawl. "Didn't expect to see you out alone?" he sneered, taking a step closer. "No Marine moves to save you this time?" Lena's military training kicked in automatically. She assessed the situation with calm precision, noting the distance to her car, the location of other shoppers, potential escape routes. Her keys were already in her hand, ready to be used as a weapon if needed. "Stay back," she warned, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You're violating your bail conditions." He laughed, an ugly sound that echoed across the parking lot. "Afraid of little old me? After all that tough talk?" But before he could take another step, something remarkable happened. Mrs. Johnson from the bakery appeared beside Lena, phone raised high. "I'm recording everything," she announced loudly. "And I've already pressed send on the video to the police." From 2 cars over, Mr. Peterson, who owned the hardware store, stepped into view. "Leave her alone," he called out firmly. "We're all witnesses here." More people emerged from between the parked cars, faces Lena recognized from church, from school meetings, from around town. They formed a loose circle, phones out, documenting everything. The creep's smirk faltered as he realized he was surrounded by witnesses. "This is harassment," came another voice, Pastor Jordan's steady tone. He walked calmly toward them, phone to his ear. "Yes, officer, I'm still here. He's violating the restraining order right now at Miller's Grocery." The creep's face twisted with rage. "You think you're so special?" he spat at Lena. "Getting everyone to protect you?" "No," Lena replied evenly. "I'm just a mother who stood up to a bully, and now everyone else is doing the same." Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. The creep looked around wildly, suddenly realizing how badly he had miscalculated. These weren't the same fearful townspeople who had hidden behind their curtains. These were citizens standing together, united against his intimidation. 2 police cars pulled into the parking lot, lights flashing. Officer Martinez, who had responded to the original diner incident, stepped out first. "Hands where we can see them," she ordered the creep. "You're under arrest for violating the conditions of your bail and harassment." As the officers handcuffed him, the creep struggled and shouted threats. But his words held no power anymore. The crowd of witnesses stepped closer to Lena, a human shield of support. Mrs. Johnson squeezed Lena's arm. "We've got the whole thing recorded, dear. He won't be getting out again any time soon." "Thank you," Lena whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "All of you." Pastor Jordan smiled gently. "No one stands alone in this town anymore. We learned that lesson." The police cars drove away, taking the creep with them. The small crowd dispersed slowly, each person offering Lena a word of support or a gentle touch on the shoulder. Mr. Peterson insisted on loading her groceries into her car himself, while Mrs. Johnson promised to bring by a fresh batch of cookies later. Finally alone in her car, Lena gripped the steering wheel as tears spilled down her cheeks. They weren't tears of fear or frustration this time, but of pure relief and gratitude. The same community that had once whispered behind her back had become her strongest defenders. She thought of her late husband's folded flag at home, imagining his proud smile. She hadn't been alone after all. She just needed to be brave enough to show others how to stand up too. With trembling hands, Lena wiped her eyes and started the car. The afternoon sun caught her rear-view mirror, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't check it nervously for followers. Instead, she drove home to tell her children about the day their town finally showed its true heart. The aroma of lasagna filled the Matthews kitchen as Lena pulled the bubbling dish from the oven. Steam rose in delicate swirls, carrying the scent of herbs and melted cheese through the air. After the drama at the grocery store, she had thrown herself into cooking, something that always helped calm her nerves. Now, watching Emma set the table and Michael pour glasses of water without being asked, she felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. "This smells amazing, Mom," Emma said, placing the last fork with careful precision. Her long brown hair was tied back in a neat ponytail, swinging gently as she moved around the table. "Yeah, way better than diner food," Michael added with a small grin, the kind that had been rare these past few weeks. He looked more relaxed than he had in days, his usual tension melting away as he slid into his chair. Lena carried the lasagna to the table, setting it on the cork trivet Emma had made in art class last year. "Well, I figured we deserve something special tonight." She didn't mention the incident at the grocery store. No need to darken this moment. As they passed the salad bowl and served steaming portions of lasagna, the conversation flowed naturally. Emma chatted about her expanding Strong Moms circle, now meeting twice a week with 12 regular members. "Sarah Johnson joined today," Emma said between bites. "She said her mom cried when she told her about the group. Happy tears, you know." Michael reached for seconds, something he hadn't done in weeks. "Coach Martinez asked about you today, Mom." said what happened at the grocery store was all over town. How everyone stood up for you. He said it was about time. Lena paused, fork halfway to her mouth. It means a lot, having people in our corner now. I was wrong, Mom. Michael's voice grew serious, his eyes fixed on his plate. About everything. About saying Dad would have prevented all this. About being embarrassed. He looked up, meeting her gaze. You're stronger than anyone I know, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. The kitchen grew quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator. Lena felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Emma reached across the table, squeezing her brother's hand. Mom's like a superhero, but better, because she's real. I want to grow up just like you, Mom, Emma continued, her voice full of conviction. Not just the strong part, but the way you never gave up on people, even when they gave up on us. Lena stood up, opening her arms. Come here, both of you. Her children rose and met her in a tight embrace. She held them close, breathing in the familiar scent of Emma's strawberry shampoo and the lingering trace of Michael's aftershave. When had he started using that? Thank you, God, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. For these amazing kids, for their resilience, for showing us the way through the dark times. They stood there for a long moment, their dinner cooling on the table, but none of them minded. When they finally separated, Michael wiped at his eyes quickly, trying to hide it with a cough. Hey, Emma said suddenly. Remember how we used to light candles on the porch? Like we did when Dad was deployed, Lena finished softly. It was our way of keeping hope alive, Michael nodded. We should do that again. Not because we're scared anymore, but because we made it through. Emma darted to the kitchen drawer where they kept the emergency candles. She pulled out 3 thick white pillars, cradling them carefully in her arms. Together, they stepped out onto the porch. The evening air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of late summer flowers from Mrs. Henderson's garden next door. The porch boards, freshly painted by volunteers, still held a faint whiff of paint. Lena struck a match, the small flame dancing in the gentle breeze. She lit each candle in turn, passing them to her children. The soft golden light illuminated their faces, casting warm shadows that danced against the house's newly repaired siding. They placed the candles on the porch railing, 3 beacons of light pushing back against the gathering dusk. Emma slipped her hand into Lena's, and Michael stood close on her other side, his shoulder touching hers. The candles flickered steadily, their flames strong and bright against the darkening sky, just like their family, Lena thought, tested by storms but still standing, still shining. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their candles glow. The peace of the moment settled over them like a warm blanket, healing and whole. Each flame represented something different now. Not just hope, but triumph. Not just survival, but victory. Not just faith, but its fulfillment. From somewhere down the street, a neighbor's wind chimes tinkled softly in the evening breeze, adding their gentle music to the sacred silence of their family's moment. The City Hall building loomed before Lena, its red brick facade warm in the morning light. She smoothed her navy blazer, the one she'd worn to formal military events, now dusted off for this unexpected meeting. Michael and Emma flanked her sides, both having insisted on coming along for support. You've got this, Mom, Emma whispered, squeezing her hand. The marble floors echoed their footsteps as they made their way to the mayor's office. Lena's heart thumped steadily against her ribs. The secretary, Mrs. Porter, greeted them with a warm smile, so different from the wary glances of just weeks ago. Mayor Thompson is ready for you, Mrs. Porter said, gesturing toward the heavy wooden door. Inside, sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting long rectangles across the polished desk. Mayor Thompson stood to greet them, his weathered face creasing into a genuine smile. Pastor Jordan was there too, standing near a leather armchair, and the sight of his familiar presence helped ease the tension in Lena's shoulders. Please, sit down, Mayor Thompson said, motioning to the chairs. Thank you for coming, Mrs. Matthews. And Michael, Emma, I'm glad you're here too. Lena settled into the chair, her children taking seats beside her. She kept her posture straight, chin lifted. The bearing of a Marine never quite leaves you. Mrs. Matthews, the mayor began, folding his hands on his desk. Recent events have shown us some hard truths about our community, both the challenges we face and... He paused, looking directly at her. The strength we possess when we stand together. Pastor Jordan stepped forward. Lena, we've been talking about creating a new position, something our town has needed for a while now. We have a growing veteran population, Mayor Thompson continued, and military families who need support. But more than that, we have single parents, people facing prejudice, folks who need someone to show them they're not alone. Lena's breath caught in her throat as understanding dawned. We'd like to offer you the position of community liaison for veteran families, the mayor said. You'd work directly with military families, help them integrate into the community, connect them with resources. But more than that, you'd be a bridge between different parts of our community. Emma grabbed Lena's hand, barely containing her excitement. Michael sat straighter in his chair. Lena started, then paused. The weight of the opportunity settled over her. That's a big responsibility, one you're uniquely qualified for, Pastor Jordan said gently. You understand both military life and civilian challenges. You've shown grace under pressure, forgiveness when it wasn't deserved, and strength that inspires others. Mayor Thompson nodded. Your daughter's Strong Moms initiative has already sparked similar groups in neighboring towns. People look up to you, Mrs. Matthews. They need someone who's walked through fire and emerged stronger. Lena glanced at her children. Michael's face held pride, the same expression he wore when looking at old photos of his father in uniform. Emma's eyes shone with tears of joy. But doubt crept in. I'm just a waitress, Lena said softly. No, Michael spoke up, surprising everyone. You're a Marine, a survivor, and the strongest person I know. His voice cracked slightly. Dad would be so proud of you right now. Tears pricked at Lena's eyes. She squared her shoulders, remembering all the times she'd felt alone, how much she would have needed someone like this when John died. The position includes an office here at City Hall, Mayor Thompson continued, and a salary that reflects the importance of the role. We'd like you to start as soon as possible. Pastor Jordan stepped closer. Remember what you told me that Sunday after church? About wanting to make something good come from all this? Lena nodded, thinking of all the families who might need someone to stand beside them, to show them they weren't alone. She thought of John, of his dedication to serving others, of the legacy she could create in his memory. Yes, she said finally, her voice strong and clear. I accept. Emma squealed and hugged her. Michael's face split into a rare, full smile. Mayor Thompson stood, extending his hand across the desk. Welcome aboard, Mrs. Matthews. They spent the next hour discussing details, salary, benefits, office space. Through it all, Lena felt a growing sense of purpose, like puzzle pieces clicking into place. This wasn't just a job. It was a mission. As they finished up, Pastor Jordan touched her shoulder. God works in mysterious ways, doesn't he? Sometimes our greatest trials lead us to our greatest purpose. Lena gathered her papers, tucking them into her folder with steady hands. The weight of the new responsibility felt right, like the familiar weight of her pack during training. Challenging, but purposeful. Together, she and her children walked out of the mayor's office. Mrs. Porter gave them a warm wave as they passed. Through the grand entrance of City Hall, sunlight beckoned them forward. Michael held the door open. Emma linked her arm through Lena's. As they stepped outside, the warm sun touched their faces, and Lena felt the last shadows of doubt melt away. They walked down the steps hand in hand, their faces lifted to the light, moving forward together into this new chapter of their lives. The wooden porch swing creaked softly as Lena pushed against the floorboards with her bare feet. The gentle motion matched the rhythm of her breathing. Steady, peaceful, sure. The evening air carried the sweet scent of late summer jasmine from Mrs. Henderson's garden next door, mixing with the lingering aroma of the chocolate chip cookies they'd baked after dinner. Michael and Emma sat cross-legged on the porch floor, dealing cards for their third round of Go Fish. The sight made Lena's heart swell. Just weeks ago, this simple family moment would have seemed impossible, with Michael's anger and Emma's worry casting shadows over their home. Got any threes? Emma asked, her eyes narrowing playfully at her brother. Go Fish, Michael replied with a grin, then glanced up at Lena. Remember when Dad taught us this game, Mom? He always let us win. Instead of the usual ache, the memory brought warmth to Lena's chest. He was terrible at pretending to lose, she said softly. Always made it so obvious when he was holding back cards. Emma gathered the deck to shuffle again. Tell us more about Dad tonight. Lena's fingers traced the chain of her wedding ring, which now hung as a necklace. "Your father would be so proud of both of you," she said. "The way you've handled everything these past few weeks, that's his strength in you." The porch light cast a gentle glow over them, creating a cozy circle of light against the deepening dusk. In the yard beyond, the first fireflies of the evening began to emerge, their tiny lights blinking like distant stars brought down to earth. "I was thinking today," Lena continued, her voice thoughtful, "about how scared I was after your father died. I thought I had to be both mother and father, had to be perfect, had to never show weakness." She paused, watching a firefly dance past. "I was so wrong about that." Michael laid down his cards and turned to face her fully. "You were never weak, Mom, even when people said those awful things about you." "That's just it," Lena said, her smile gentle. "I used to think being a single mom meant I was somehow less than other parents. But these past weeks taught me something important." She stopped the swing's motion, letting her words settle in the quiet evening air. "Being a single mom isn't weakness. It's where I found my greatest strength." Emma stood up and squeezed onto the swing beside her mother. "Like when you started that new job helping other veteran families?" "Exactly," Lena nodded, wrapping an arm around her daughter. "Sometimes our biggest challenges lead us to our true purpose. All those years in the Marines, then losing your father, raising you two alone, it wasn't about surviving. It was about learning who I really am." The cards lay forgotten as Michael moved to sit on Lena's other side. The swing groaned slightly under their combined weight, but held steady, just as they had held steady for each other. "Remember what Pastor Jordan said?" Michael asked. "About how strength isn't about not being afraid, but about doing what's right even when you are afraid." Lena kissed the top of his head, marveling at how her angry teenage son had transformed into this thoughtful young man. He's a wise man, and he was right about another thing, too. We're never really alone, even when it feels that way. A chorus of crickets joined the evening symphony, their chirping a gentle backdrop to the family's conversation. More fireflies appeared, turning their front yard into a magical display of floating lights. "Look!" Emma pointed excitedly. "They're everywhere tonight." Lena watched the lights dance, remembering nights on base when she and her fellow Marines would share stories under similar starlit skies. Those moments of brotherhood had carried her through dark times, just as her children's love and their community support had carried her through recent weeks. "You know what makes me proudest?" she said, her voice carrying the weight of deep emotion. "Not that we proved those gossips wrong, or that we stood up to bullies. I'm proudest that we did it together, with grace and dignity." Michael picked up one of the abandoned playing cards, the Queen of Hearts. "Like this card, Mom. You're the Queen of our hearts." Emma groaned at the corny joke, but Lena laughed, the sound carrying across the yard like music. Soon all three of them were laughing, the kind of deep, healing laughter that chases away the last shadows of fear and doubt. The porch light caught the moisture in Lena's eyes, turning her tears into tiny prisms of joy. These moments, these simple, precious moments, were worth every struggle, every whispered word, every battle fought and won. Fireflies continued their dance in the growing darkness, their lights blinking like nature's own celebration. The warm glow from their porch light wrapped around the family like a protective embrace, creating a perfect circle of peace in the summer night. "Who's up for ice cream?" Lena asked, breaking their comfortable silence. "Me!" Both children chorused, another wave of laughter following their synchronized response. Their joy echoed into the night air, carried on the breeze along with the scent of jasmine and the song of crickets. The porch light shone steadily, a beacon of warmth and welcome in the gathering dark, illuminating three hearts that had grown stronger through adversity, three souls bound together by love and resilience. The evening wrapped around them like a familiar blanket, soft and secure. This was home, not just the building with its repaired windows and fresh paint, but this moment, this feeling, this unshakable knowledge that they were exactly where they were meant to be. Fireflies continued their ethereal dance as the family's laughter rang out once more, pure and true in the summer night. The porch light glowed warm and steady, a gentle reminder that light always follows darkness, that love always conquers fear, that family, in all its forms, remains life's greatest blessing. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Lena Matthews, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.